Well, I'm so excited today to bring on Emily Honor Hubbard for our show today because me and her have had so many discussions about hidden disabilities and what does that look like? What does that look like in top talent? How can we support our workforce through it? And she's given me so many tips and tricks and techniques, and I follow her on social media, and she puts out great tools. And what I'm finding out is some of the struggles I saw in HR trying to support our employees, our top performers, they may have had this hidden disability. There is other people who have disabilities or behaviors shown that I didn't really know how to interact with either. And Emily has not only kind of dug into this to lead other employers, but she's had to deal with some of this herself. So those that teach also probably do. So let's dig into this a little bit more. She has quite a story and kind of an adventure of a career and got into guiding others on this executive functioning development. And I thought just the combination of those three words was interesting. So tell me a little bit more about what that is and how did you even get to that? What's your story?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, Kelly. I'm always excited to talk about executive functioning because it is a term that a lot of people define differently, along with what actually came before executive functioning was my work with neurodiversity. So I have a little bit of a unique background getting into professional development, but I started out as a mechanical engineer. And when I was in school, I also published research on the development of empathy in engineers. So I took that experience with me, not really knowing what I would do with that realization that we can practice skills that were previously considered to be fixed. Sometimes people will say that's just not an empathetic person. There's no chance they're going to learn empathy. But I saw not only empathy, but also skills like organization, impulse control, emotional regulation. Those can all be practiced and developed over time. So I'd say I really started to notice it when I worked as an engineer in Mexico because I saw how interactions changed between cultures or languages. I would have a lot of teams meeting with engineers in the US and then also have the plant in Mexico that was trying to solve a problem, but most of the meeting was being dominated by these native English speakers. And I saw that pattern happening time and time again. So when I moved back to the US and started to understand my own identity with neurodivergence, ADHD, and autism, I realized it was the same thing that my Mexican coworkers experienced when they felt silence. It was not because they didn't know what was going on, didn't have great solutions. It was because their voice wasn't being shared in the best way. And so, like I said, it's a little bit of a winding path, but now I'm really grateful because I saw these recurring challenges with communication that ultimately could be solved by helping teams develop executive functioning skills. And now that's what I dedicate my work to.
Yeah, and there's a couple of layers that you mentioned in that. So the neurodivergence,
Yeah.
ADHD, autism, but then also mechanical engineer. So I'm from manufacturing, 2 decades in manufacturing, that is a technical minefield in which it wants to be black or white, but things are not black and white. So there's this
Mhm.
automatic conflict that comes into play because things don't turn out the way that you want them or the best laid plans, especially manufacturing with constant change. So when I want to back up a little bit to talk about what is neurodivergence, because it kind of depends who I'm talking to, what the definition of that is, and what are common misconceptions of what muddied this kind of definition of it, so that we can get back to what is it actually and how we can help people move forward.
Yeah. Yes, and I love talking about this topic. It deserves a lot of attention, but I think one of the best ways to demonstrate it is by taking your hands. I'm going to have you do a little activity with me, Kelly. So
Okay.
you can take your right hand and put it in front of you, and then say the word strength.
Strengths.
Great. And then take your left hand, put it pretty close, let's say 6 inches from your right hand. Good. And then say challenges.
Challenges.
All right. So with your hands right here, you can say the word neurotypical.
Neurotypical.
Wonderful. And then take your hands and put them outside of your shoulders. And then say neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent.
Great. So you can put your hands down and then feel free to use that anytime someone asks you. But for me, that's been the best way to explain how someone might be really good at solving problems alone at their desk, but then have a really hard time being able to explain that in a meeting. And it's just because that difference is larger. And that's how we identify neurodivergent conditions, which include ADHD, autism, dyslexia, mental health challenges. There's a whole umbrella under that idea.
Yeah, and I love that visual that you just gave. And if you're listening to this on the podcast and you're driving, just, keep one hand on the wheel while you're doing this exercise. But it's a great visual to show the
Mhm.
difference. And I think sometimes when we get stuck either in traditional ways or the ways that we've always done it, we forget that those patterns are disruptive for others and their success. And that's all we're doing here is to set people up for success that leads to productivity and results. So let's go into that. What are some strengths or superpowers that you've seen emerge when you can acknowledge that someone is neurodivergent or they can bring these amazing skill sets, but they've previously maybe been misunderstood?
Yeah, of course. So I think it's important also to recognize that about 30% of the population is neurodivergent. And I say that because it's really easy to think someone else is working with a team that has neurodivergent people on it, but I guarantee any of you that work on a team with 10 people or more, there's going to be some level of neurodivergence within that team. And that's important to recognize because there are always going to be misunderstandings. And part of that can come from the way that a person processes. There might be one person on the team that solves problems in their head extremely quickly. And I have been in that situation before where I felt like everyone else was supposed to be keeping up with me. Everyone studied the same topic, right? So in theory, we would all be at the same place. And then I would get impatient by not having people to ask questions to because they weren't understanding how quickly I was explaining the problem. But when I started to again relate it back to my experience in learning Spanish as a second language, it became a lot easier to see how a person that is really gifted or even really interested in modeling a certain machine and understanding how it works, that can be their area of expertise or what's called a special interest. But they have to also recognize that it's not the same for everyone else on the team. And so that's what we talk through when I work with clients. I always bring situations that I've lived through into the lessons because I think it's important to acknowledge that we're imperfect in our communication and that it's something we can always practice because then the clients I work with will go from coming in late to their job, kind of just feeling like they're not valued or that they can't set boundaries in order to work on focused areas of their job. Two, after just 8 or 12 weeks, we're finding that one woman named Shada started to look forward to going into work. She started coming in instead of 10 a.m. with a sort of flexible schedule. She came in at 8 a.m. every day because the routine she found was beneficial, and that gave her the focus time that she wanted, but it just took a little bit of conversation and testing out what would work for her.
Yeah. And I love the few words that you have said as part of this because really you're playing to their strengths. So you mentioned some people need that alone work time, but they're not going to present in a group. And I think we want people to do everything. And
Mhm.
you're not, and when you really look at that, and as we move into, freelance fractional contract work, which 50% of the specialized and top talent will be in by 2030, I'm thinking of this. If you got someone that works phenomenally on their own or in deep work focus, why would you want to pull them out of that? Certainly you want team collaboration and alignment, but their strength is not a presentation, right? But someone else's is. Or like you said, if someone can see 17 steps ahead, why are we slowing them down? Right? Let's work on closing the steps to get there, defining that, uh, clarifying the steps to get there, but you're slowing them down because
Yeah.
of the misunderstanding. And I've seen that in manufacturing too, where someone will see, the end step when we're just trying to problem solve. And it's phenomenal to watch their mind work because they're not bogged down with all the other restrictions of thinking that we are. And so when you can play to those superpowers, imagine what could be. And I think the more open we get in our work cultures, the more, like you said, better we get at communication. I think the more we can unlock that potential and that creativity and innovation. We hear that over and over again, right? Right. In a changing world, let's be creative, let's be innovative. And now we have to do it faster than ever. And there's people within our organizations all around us that you just need to unlock. You need to put them in the right environment. You need to surround them with support, and they would just soar. And I can already think of individuals I've seen in HR that they definitely were not set up for that type of success.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what are the biggest challenges then uh, that they're facing neurodivergent employees, top talent, these specialized superpowers? What type of challenges are they facing in these traditional workforces?
Yeah. I'll bring up the challenge that actually inspired a lot of my work, and I share it not to place blame on any company or situation, rather to highlight it as a learning experience. So when I moved back to the US and worked in manufacturing, I had not gone in person to interview with this company after I was living in Mexico. I had felt like it was pretty normal year 2022, so people were still comfortable doing that. But I didn't know that when I got into work, I would have a desk right next to the manufacturing floor. And the first day I got there, I thought, okay, this is exciting. This will let me learn everything I need, a lot of hands-on, face-to-face time with people that work on the line. And for the first few months, it was perfect for me. And then I got assigned a project that required a lot of deep work and future thinking. Frankly, it was 2 or 3 years in front of what we were working on in the line. So I started to recognize that I got very overwhelmed because I was also being told all the problems that were happening in the moment. And I was trying to think 3 years ahead, but without that ability to really calm down. And so I made a request to move my desk into the office, and because I didn't present the situation very clearly, my request got denied. And that ultimately pushed me to a point where I started to feel so overwhelmed, as if I was going to throw up walking into work. And again, I pointed out because part of it was also me not knowing how to present the case to my manager, to HR, in a way that was useful for everyone. And so from that, I have learned one phrase that universally, whether or not you identify as neurodivergent, is extremely beneficial. And that phrase is, I work best when.
I love that. Wait, I'm gonna just write that down. Let's say it one more time for
Perfect.
everyone.
Perfect. So I work best when is an amazing way to lead into conversations that might sound like accommodation. I think that word, accommodation, almost feels like a lot of work, as if we're going to have to change everyone's routine because one employee wants their desk to be moved to a different area. But at the end of the day, if your goal is for me to work well and my goal is for me to work well, like this makes sense. So that's been really beneficial now for getting to help people create the environment that really works well for them.
So some of these things aren't even about accommodation, like you said. It's productivity optimization. Where do you work best? And I think some of these conversations I'm having with clients on remote work still, and they don't think people are working if they're not visually present in their office. And visibility is not productivity. It's not impact. We all know that. So the real question is, what is the goal? What is the outcome that you want? And how can you measure it? Because then people can work from remote places. They can work in whatever desk they work best. The deep work thing is a huge thing. And in many different fields, especially technical, engineering, accounting, right? Every time you get kicked out of that mode, like you said, you had to troubleshoot or people will pull you in for things. It's going to take so much mental calorie and energy to get back into that. So I work best when. All right. We're going to just do a bunch of reps. Everyone who listens to that, do a bunch of reps. So that just comes out. It comes out at home. It comes out at work. And it's the new language. We're using that. So what are a few but small, high impact things employers can do? Because like you said, I think sometimes we get deterred or adverse when we talk about accommodation, but sometimes these are small. These are small little switches that can optimize the talent you have, those superpowers that we're all looking for. How can employers do these small switches for neurodivergent talent without singling them out?
Mm. Yeah, I believe one of the biggest things, if your company isn't doing this already, is that you need to start the conversation, and preferably with someone that is very open to identifying as a champion, either for disabilities in general or for neurodiversity. And I work a lot with employee resource groups, and I know even with how the world changes, sometimes there are challenges to maintain employee resource groups, but I want employees to know that isn't the only structure that can support you in creating the environment that you want or the work culture that you want. So it might just be a few friends creating a Teams chat that say, I've struggled with the fluorescent lights. I feel really overwhelmed. Do any of you have ideas of how I might be able to work better, like potentially wearing a certain type of glasses? I wear glasses that filter blue light because it helps me reduce headaches. And I learned that just from talking to other people that felt overstimulated and really sensitive to the spaces they were working in.
Hmm. And there's no doubt the environmental factors either drain or energize throughout your day.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the lights because our engineers also had the fluorescent lights taken out, and management was worried about what does that look like to customers? It looks like we can't keep the lights on. And I had to remind them they're looking at screens detailed for hours.
Mhm.
The mental fatigue that has to go with that, the eye fatigue that has to go with that. And again, and I wish I knew this, I wish I knew you were saying back then, I work best when, because what I would have said, how do they work best? Because our
Mhm.
customers are here for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and then they're in a conference room. It's easy enough to explain our engineers are doing detailed, high quality work for you. So that's why we keep the lights low. Uh, Everyone understands screen fatigue, right? I work best when. They work best when. I'm just going to keep saying that until that sticks. That is a beautiful saying coined by Emily right now. Mm.
Great. I love
So
it. And anyone can use it.
you mentioned you work with ERP groups. What other services do you offer if people are looking to get more resources from you?
Yeah, so a lot of times I look for champions in a company that understand the benefit of helping employees feel good at work. So sometimes that is culture and development, but a lot of times it comes from human resources. And whether it's specific to an onboarding experience or a longer term training, like I said, professional development actually starts with personal development. So whatever you're looking for your team to achieve, it's important to recognize. And a lot of times I'll do a sort of audit, I'll interview employees to understand what it is they feel will help them work better. Maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's some asynchronous work that requires reflection, discussion, just an organized lunch meeting, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I really like to understand where the company's at and then work from there.
Yeah, I love the customization of it because every organization is going to be just a little bit different on their mix of team members and um, what they have available to them as well. Well, thanks, Emily, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You brought so many good insights. We got some scripts to work with and a little bit more
Mhm.
understanding about how not only we can support neurodivergent top talent, but also how we can unlock their superpower. If you're looking for Emily's information, go check out the show notes down in the caption, and we'll see you back here soon.